And we've managed to avoid stage 4 drought determination, which is great. We're still working on temporary emergency repairs to the Robles diversion facility, but the fish passage and diversion facility have been operational since January 15th. We had to shut it down, the facility, for about five days due to the storm on January 9th and 10th. But we've managed to divert about 8,000 acre feet of water this water year at Robles. Plus we have all the inflows from the tributaries on Coyote and Santa Ana Creeks. And just lastly, we've increased the lake by over 31,000 acre feet from January 1st through yesterday. Those are the updates I have.
Thank you. Paul, I saw you had your hand raised. Is there anything you want to add?
I emailed you yesterday afternoon, but I got a series of aerial photos of the watershed that I thought may be of interest. I'd be happy to share those. You know, there's about 15 of them that were taken with a drone from the river mouth up above Robles.
Oh yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to see that. I'm sorry I missed your email. I'm coming back from maternity leave, so I'm not exactly full-time hours yet, so I may have missed it.
Yeah, so do we want to do that, or
yeah, you can do that. I think well, Jody, would you prefer that be after? I don't know if you're like on a time.
No, go for it. I'm no time constraint.
Okay.
I'll run through them quickly. Can I share my PowerPoint?
Yeah, you should be able to. I promoted you to a panelist.
So that's weird. No, it's not letting me for some reason.
Okay, we can come back to you and we can figure it out like during the break or towards the end.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, so our first presenter is going to be Jody Switzer. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Awesome. From the Farm Bureau for Ventura County, and she will be giving us a update on, you know, just what the Farm Bureau is, and also a water quality framework presentation. So Jody, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, let me. Okay, great. So I think you all should be seeing my introductory slide. So like Heidi said, my name is Jody Switzer. I'm the water program director here with the Farm Bureau of Ventura County. And one of the main things that I do is manage our VCALG program. So VCALG is an acronym for the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group. And what I'm going to be talking about today includes both a high-level regulatory background of the regulatory program that drives the need for this, but then also what the VCALG program is in general. One of the things that Heidi, Lynn, and I were chatting about before the meeting was just trying to remember when the last time that we had given an overview of this program to this group, and we couldn't recall that. So I hope this isn't too redundant for people and that this is new and useful information. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go if those come up. I'll just let Heidi chime in if anything comes up in the Q&A box, or feel free to raise your hand and ask me a question. But I'm also going to be going over what types of water quality monitoring that we do through the VCALG program, what that monitoring is showing us, and then the management practices that growers are implementing in response to that. And then finally, I'll share just a little bit of information, what we know and what we don't know about some of the regulatory changes that are going to be coming later this year. Okay, so I'll start here with a really general regulatory overview. So at the state level, we have the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, which is overseen by the State Water Resources Control Board, and then it's implemented by each of the 9 regional boards in California. And each of those regional boards develop and adopt their own regulatory program to implement that Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. So they tend to look a little bit different from region to region. And that makes sense because the agriculture is different from region to region. The water quality issues are different from region to region. So those regulatory orders need to be focused and customized to that particular area. And then the mechanism is sometimes a little bit different. So some of those programs are implemented through a conditional ag waiver, which is also called a conditional waiver or an ag waiver, or they might be implemented through waste discharge requirements, which are WDRs, also known as ag orders. I'll talk a little bit about the differences between those and what we have here in just a moment. But no matter which region of the state, some of the common elements of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program is that it applies to all growers who irrigate a commercial crop. And then it regulates the water that discharges off of those fields in surface water, as well as what's infiltrating down through the root zone into groundwater. And when we're talking about surface water discharges, we're talking about both irrigation tailwater and stormwater flows off of land. With the overarching goal of those regulatory programs to control and prevent contaminants from getting into those receiving water bodies and protecting the beneficial uses of those water bodies. So whether that be drinking water or recreation or habitat for flora and fauna, whatever those beneficial uses are. And then the pathways that growers are available to comply with these regulatory programs are also common throughout the state. So growers are given the option of complying as an individual, in which case they work directly with their regional water quality control board. They do all of their own monitoring, all of their own reporting, or they can join a coalition, which binds growers together where they are working collaboratively to implement the regulatory program on behalf of agricultural stakeholders in a particular area. So those are what we call the third-party coalitions. And in Ventura County, that coalition is the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group, or VCALG for short. So focusing in on our region, the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program is implemented through a conditional waiver of waste discharge requirements for discharges from irrigated lands is the full regulatory order name there. And one misconception that I just want to dispel really quickly is that when we use the term ag waiver or a conditional waiver, it sounds like agricultural is getting a waiver or an exemption from having to do or comply with something. And that's not the case. The waiver part mainly has to do with how you file for coverage under that regulatory program. And then the conditions of that conditional waiver set all of those requirements, which are very similar to an ag order or WDRs. One of the primary differences are the terms of those regulatory programs. So a conditional ag waiver is limited to 5-year terms. So once they're adopted, they need to be reevaluated and replaced within 5 years. And WDRs or ag orders are long-term regulatory programs. And generally, most regions start their irrigated lands regulatory programs under a conditional waiver because, you know, they're collecting data, they're trying to figure out what's going to work, everybody's learning together, and you want that opportunity to reevaluate and change direction if needed. But generally over time, regional water boards switch to an ag order so that you can get out of this every 5-year renewal cycle, which takes a lot of administrative focus. And we're at that point right now in our region. So we've had 3 iterations of the conditional waiver. The first one was adopted in 2005 in our region and expired in 2010. Second one was then adopted in 2010. And each Each term generally builds on the previous term. So there are new requirements that are added each conditional waiver term. So in this 2010 second conditional waiver, that's when all of the TMDLs were added in to the conditional waiver. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a TMDL is, and I'll use that term a couple times here. So it's essentially a watershed plan for restoring the beneficial use of an impaired water body by establishing a load of a constituent that water body can accommodate and still meet its beneficial uses. And then when a regional board incorporates those TMDLs into a regulatory order, like a conditional waiver, it gives them a regulatory mechanism for implementing and enforcing that TMDL plan. So it establishes additional monitoring requirements and then discharge limitations for that specific TMDL. And for the Ventura River Watershed, we've got the algae TMDL, which is focused on nutrients, and then also the Ventura River Estuary Trash TMDL. And then in 2016 was when the third term of the conditional waiver was adopted and was supposed to expire in 2001, has since been extended for 3 short-term durations, which we're now in that kind of third extension period. And then we know that an ag order is going to be adopted following the expiration or prior to the expiration of the current conditional waiver. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's going to be happening later this year. A couple of elements that were new in the 2016, so our current conditional waiver that I wanted to mention here is that there was an increased focus on groundwater. So I'm not going to be talking a lot about groundwater, but I just wanted to mention this. So what you see here is a map of the groundwater nitrate trends tracking report that VCALG puts together annually. And then, we submit that to the regional board. So it's a public document. This map right here just kind of shows a distribution of the concentration of nitrate in wells throughout the basins in the county. There are also source investigation studies for surface water in areas that warranted that. There are time certain deadlines for those TMDLs. I'm going to talk about why that's important in a moment here. And then nitrogen management plan requirements were added for certain areas. And I'll talk about that one again a little bit later on as well. So who is VCALG and what do we do? We are a discharger group or a third-party coalition that was established in 2006. So just after the first conditional waiver was adopted in 2005, there was a need for an entity to step up and assist growers with compliance. So the Farm Bureau took on that role. In other regions of the state, it's not always the Farm Bureau doing this work. I believe the only other Farm Bureau that does similar work to this would be the San Diego County Farm Bureau. In other regions, usually it's just a nonprofit entity is created to then help growers with this. So just north of us here in Santa Barbara County, up through Monterey in the Central Coast region, there's an entity called Water Quality Preservation Inc. or Preservation Inc. and they do this work. In the Central Valley, there are quite a few different coalitions that were created to do similar work like this as well. But for Ventura County, it's the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group. We are overseen by a 16-member steering committee, which is composed of primarily growers, but also agricultural representatives, and then water agencies that serve agricultural operations are also on that steering committee. And then the group is funded by a per acreage assessment. And that per acreage assessment varies depending on the watershed that a particular field is located in. So if there are additional TMDL monitoring requirements or special studies that are required, then the per acreage rate in the particular watershed is going to be higher than an area that is meeting more of its water quality benchmarks. And then a snapshot of what our enrollment looks like currently. So we're just shy of 80,000 irrigated acres in the county. And that's an estimated 91% of the irrigated acreage in the county. And our membership includes over 1,400 individual landowners and growers, which accounts for approximately 78% of the landowners in the county. Let me take a quick drink. So the work that we do through VCALG is really a collaboration between VCALG and growers and those landowners, which with each of these roles and responsibilities playing a critical role in the success of the program. So some of the things that VCALG does, we implement the water quality sampling, all of the special studies that are required, and that includes both surface water and groundwater. We develop and update the water quality management plans. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment here. We do all of the reporting to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And then we also implement the education and outreach program. So there are workshops that we help facilitate or host throughout the year that are bringing water quality specific education to growers to help inform the types of best management practices to implement in response to water quality issues. And then the things that those growers and or landowners are then responsible for doing on their own is first maintaining their membership in VCALG. So they need to maintain their membership and then pay their share of that program cost. They need to report the BMPs that they're implementing when we do periodic best management practice surveys. They need to attend 2 hours per year of water quality focused continuing education. They need to develop field level nitrogen management plans in areas where those are required. And then last, but certainly not least, is they need to actually implement those BMPs on the farm. So those in-field actions are obviously something that only growers can do. And then a kind of third role that I didn't include here, and that's the regulatory oversight and enforcement role, and that is the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So while VCALG, we administer and we implement this program for growers, we are not enforcement and have no regulatory capabilities. So how does VCALG's monitoring program work? So here's a visual snapshot of our sampling program. And as you can see, we have 20 delineated sub-watersheds, which we refer to as responsibility areas or RAs. And each of these RAs are assigned to one or more representative monitoring sites. And you can see the icons here on the map that indicate those monitoring sites, and the color coding reflects the function of that particular monitoring site. So the ones that you see here in yellow, those are TMDL specific monitoring sites where we're focused on one or more TMDL specific constituents. So we might only be looking at legacy pesticides or nutrients at that particular site. And the sites in green are sampled for the full list of water quality constituents required by the conditional waiver. And I'll show that list in just a moment here. So generally speaking, we sample each of these sites 4 times per year, twice in the wet season, twice in the dry season. Some of these TMDL sites are visited more frequently as required. And the results of those water quality sampling activities are then used to identify benchmark exceedances within those watersheds and then inform the best management practice recommendations for all of the growers within that encompassing responsibility area. So all of the agricultural land within each responsibility area is being represented by that internal representative monitoring site. Even if they don't directly discharge to it, the sites were selected based on the agricultural land that drains to them, is representative of the larger agricultural land within that area. So zooming in on the Ventura River watershed specifically, this map gives you kind of an idea of the distribution of agricultural production, as well as the variety of crop types, or it's kind of lack of variety for Ventura River watershed. The vast majority of which is orchards. So 98% are citrus or avocado orchards, while the remaining 2%, we've got strawberries, you know, a little bit of row crop, some grapes, greenhouses, and then hay and grasses. And then within the Ventura River watershed as well, we have 3 monitoring sites, 2 of which are located in the upper part of the watershed, 1 in the lower part of the watershed. So we have a monitoring site at San Antonio Creek, right at Grand Avenue, Thatcher Creek at Ojai Avenue, and then in the very lower part of the watershed, off of the agricultural drain that drains to Reach 2 of the Ventura River. And so here is that list of constituents that we're sampling for at all of our full conditional waiver constituent sites. So the site off of San Antonio Creek and Thatcher Creek, we're looking at all of these constituents here. The site in the lower reach of the Ventura River, we're looking at only nutrients because that one is a dedicated monitoring site for the Ventura River algae TMDL. So for the sites where we're looking at all of the constituents, we're measuring field parameters, general water quality constituents, so total dissolved, suspended solids, hardness, chloride, sulfates. We're looking at nutrients, so total ammonia, nitrate as nitrogen, total nitrogen, and then phosphates. Pesticides, and when we're talking about pesticides, we look at legacy pesticides. So those are products that are no longer used. So think of something like a DDT. We're looking at organophosphorus pesticides, some of which are no longer used, some of which are still in current use. Pyrethroid pesticides, which are generally your current use pesticides. And then also for the Ventura River watershed, due to, you know, a kind of continuing issue of community concern brought up, we also have added glyphosate as an analyte here to see if it is found in any of the creeks. And I'll go over the results in a moment there. And then metals, and when we're talking about metals, we're talking about copper generally, trash, bacteria, and then aquatic toxicity. And as I already mentioned, so we visit those sites twice during the dry season, twice during the wet season. Okay, so the results of that water quality monitoring program that I just described then inform the best management practices that growers implement. And the way that this works is through an iterative BMP implementation process. And the conditional waiver requires that growers implement best management practices to the degree necessary to meet water quality objectives. So VCALD provides a list of recommended BMPs that are targeted to address any of the listed water quality issues for a specific responsibility area. And then it's up to the growers to determine which of those recommendations would best fit their operation or best work in their operation. And this is an acknowledgement of the fact that all crops are different, all fields are different, operations are different, your drainages are vastly different as well. And so the same approach isn't necessarily going to work everywhere. And in agriculture, a custom approach is necessary. And these recommendations are revised with each update of the water quality management plan. And that's based on updated sampling data and evaluations of effectiveness that I'll go into this iterative process right here that I'll describe. So We start with sampling to characterize the existing water quality conditions in the watershed. And then that sampling informs the development of a water quality management plan. So we're doing surveys to growers to ask about what practices they're implementing. We're looking at what the water quality data is showing us, and then we're developing a WQMP. And I'll talk a little bit more about that development process in a moment. But that essentially sets the roadmap for improving water quality. Then we conduct education and outreach to growers to inform them of what this plan entails, and then for those growers to then implement those best management practices or increase the implementation of existing best management practices. And then we evaluate the effectiveness of that. So we again do a BMP survey to measure what has changed. We look at new water quality monitoring data and see if additional improvement or additional implementation is then needed. We update that water quality management plan with that updated approach, and then cycle back through, sample again, see if it's working. If it's not working, revise that plan and change course. Okay, so what those results are showing, and then the on-farm actions that growers are implementing in response to that. So the first observation that I want to note here is that looking back over the past 3 years of sampling data, we've had no dry weather flows at any of the monitoring sites in the Ventura River Watershed. And this is really a testament to the irrigation efficiency and those runoff management BMPs that growers are implementing. So no flow during irrigation during dry weather is really great. And that's exactly what we want to see. But even prior to that 3-year period, we would occasionally have dry weather flows, but the majority of the water quality exceedances were still associated with wet weather flows. So even if we did have dry weather flows, those are generally meeting water quality benchmarks. And wet weather flows are very difficult to control. I'm sure everybody who works in the watershed knows this, especially after the January 9th storm event, and really kind of saw how flashy the runoff in that watershed can be when we get those intense rain events. So here's a quick kind of tabular summary of benchmark exceedances for each category. And I apologize, my color coding didn't come through, so it looks a little bit messy here. But this top category, so those that are not always, but frequently exceeding benchmarks are bacteria. And so again, this is wet weather sampling and legacy pesticides. And when we're talking about legacy pesticides, we're generally talking about DDT and its breakdown products. And those are measured in nanograms per liter. So, we're not talking about parts per million or parts per billion, we're talking about parts per trillion. And the benchmark there is less than 1 part per trillion. So essentially, if it can be detected in that laboratory analysis, then it exceeds that benchmark. So we're still talking about pretty low levels, but this is something that is pretty consistently found in wet weather sampling events, because as we all know, these legacy pesticides persist in the environment, and they also are generally sediment-borne pesticides. So they bind with those soil particles, and whenever we have sediment mobilization, those legacy pesticides go with it. So that would be a best management practice to control legacy pesticides, would be a sediment control best management practice, because there is no source control because these pesticides aren't being used anymore. Categories of constituents that are occasionally exceeding benchmarks. The only category that falls in there would be nutrients. And that is pretty occasional. I say rare to occasional. So over the past 5 years of monitoring data, 80% of our samples have met the benchmark. So there's just that 20% that have exceeded the benchmark that additional work is then needed to address. And then the categories that are consistently meeting water quality benchmarks or just not detected at all include current use pesticides. And this also includes glyphosate. So we have never detected that in any of the monitoring that we're doing. And again, we're taking 4 samples a year at each of these monitoring sites. It also includes metals and selenium, salts, and then toxicity. So that's all really great news that these constituent categories are consistently meeting those water quality objectives or just completely non-detect in the receiving water bodies here in the Ventura River watershed. So when we do have an exceedance of a water quality benchmark, additional or expanded BMPs are needed to address those. And the roadmap for doing that is VCALG's Water Quality Management Plan, or WQMP. So we start this off with what I had mentioned really quickly is that grower survey of best management practices. So we keep those surveys standardized so that the results are comparable every 2 years or so that those surveys are conducted, and we're able to track a measurable increase of BMP implementation or a change of a management practice. And then we're able to separate those results based on the watershed, because these surveys are submitted specific to each agricultural parcel that's enrolled in the program. So we're able to say, for the Ventura River watershed, here is the measurable increase of a particular type of management practice. And then compare that to additional water quality data that we're just continually collecting. So we can say, is water quality improving? If it's not, then we look at, what is the current implementation level for a particular type of best management practice that might be targeted at a constituent that's not improving. And then is there additional management practice implementation or expanded management practice implementation that would be needed to further improve a particular constituent concentration in order to meet a water quality objective. And the kind of degree of implementation goal is based on the magnitude of an exceedance or potentially a compliance deadline that might be approaching that would necessitate an accelerated approach. So the water quality management plan itself usually clocks in at well over 400 pages. So understandably, this isn't something that growers are, sitting down and reading entirely. So we put together these consolidated water quality management plan handouts that summarize the most important information in that plan for their specific watershed. So it identifies the water quality issues at their representative monitoring site. It lists the BMPs that are targeted to identify that constituent. And so I understand this form is probably too small to read, but just to kind of give you a glimpse of what it looks like. The second page, we list required and recommended best management practices specific to water quality exceedances that are identified. It's less common to have required best management practices because, as I mentioned, there is that kind of flexibility and customization that's needed because of the differences in farming operations in fields. But in the Ventura River watershed, one best management practice that is required for all agricultural operations is the development of a nitrogen management plan. And that's mandated under the Ventura River LG TMDL, which says all growers in the watershed must have this plan. So we have that listed here as a required BMP. Everything else is a recommended BMP to help address additional water quality exceedances. So some of those recommended BMPs, if there were dry weather exceedances, which, as I mentioned, in Ventura watershed, there aren't, but in other watersheds there are. So what those BMPs would look like would be irrigation efficiency, source controls, that's, management of your nutrient application program or your pest control program, or sediment as a source control. And then also treatment BMPs. So that might look like a denitrifying bioreactor. And then wet weather BMPs are generally, what's going to help keep sediment in place. So mulch and cover cropping, grassed waterways, rock placement, wattle check dams along drainage areas, and then retention or detention basins to hold runoff and allow the sediment to fall out. And I mentioned nitrogen management plans or nutrient management plans, kind of use those two terms interchangeably, but they are focused on nitrogen. Are required in the Ventura River Watershed and also other watersheds. So they're not required everywhere yet. Right now, they are only required in responsibility areas or watersheds that either have nutrient exceedances or that have nutrient TMDLs that mandate the need for this plan. So that's the case in the Ventura River Watershed. The color coding here is just an indication of when those plans were first due. So for growers in the Ventura River Watershed, those plans were first due in January of 2019, and then they're updated annually. And I'll show you a quick snapshot of what that plan looks like. So it's essentially a nitrogen accounting for your operation. You're accounting for all of your various nitrogen input sources. So that's going to include your fertilizer. It's also going to include nitrogen from organic sources, mulches, cover cropping, whatnot. Nitrogen that's in your irrigation water as well. It's an accounting of all of those nitrogen inputs, and then also an accounting of your nitrogen that is removed from the system in harvest. These plans need to be certified. So there's a couple different ways that they can be certified. A grower can work with a certified crop advisor, or they can work with the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS. They can work with UC Cooperative Extension Farm Advisor to develop a plan, or they can self-certify if they go through this really extensive training program that we put on, which is 6 hours of very focused nutrient and irrigation management training, and then they have to pass a test afterwards. And if they get through that, then they are qualified to self-certify their own plans. And for right now, these plans are a management tool to help manage your nutrient program, but they are on farm only. And this is going to be important because I'm going to be talking about how that's going to change coming up. And then I just want to highlight a couple of assistance programs that have helped growers implement some of these recommended best management practices. Some of these programs aren't specific to the watershed, Ventura River Watershed, but the first one here that I'll highlight, which unfortunately the funding has run out for this program, but it was really successful while it lasted. This was the Agricultural Water Use Efficiency Program, which is funded through Prop 84 drought grant that the Watershed Protection District procured and then worked with the Farm Bureau to administer this program. So we were able to distribute $1.2 million in cost share equipment funding to growers to upgrade their irrigation systems to something more efficient that both saves water, but also applies irrigation more uniformly in a way that is also protective of water quality. The entire program funded 41 projects, 8 of which were in the Ventura River Watershed, with a projected savings of over 1,400 acre feet per year over all of these projects. And some of those projects included drip to micro sprinkler conversions, variable frequency drives for pumps, storage tanks so that water could be used when the plants needed it and not just when an irrigation delivery was scheduled. High efficiency filters that wasted less water when they are back flushing, soil moisture sensors so that growers are knowing when those plants really need irrigation and how much they need, automated controllers for irrigation systems, and then also detention basins to help capture runoff, potentially for reuse or infiltration. And then a couple more here. So I believe that the RCD has some additional programs that I might not have captured here. But one I wanted to highlight is the II Merlin program, the interactive irrigation management to reduce the leaching of nitrogen. They all have these very long names. And this program is focused on nutrient and irrigation management, installing these monitoring stations. And then there's the National Water Quality Initiative program through USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service that has some special funding for Cayugas Creek as well as Ventura River Watersheds. And this program really helps kind of set a roadmap for where that funding can be best utilized. And then they have their general environmental quality incentive program, or their EQIP program through, again, NRCS for farm specific conservation planning, and then some cost share as well for best management practices. And then our nitrogen management plan self-certification training program that I mentioned briefly, that we work in collaboration with California Department of Food and Agriculture's Fertilizer Research and Education Program, or their FREP program, to accredit and implement. So I will wrap up here by talking a little bit about some upcoming regulatory changes that we anticipate. And there's a lot that we don't know because we haven't seen a draft of what this next ag order is going to look like. So, you know, I can only kind of speak very generally about what we think that timeline is going to be like, what we think those changes are going to be like. And hopefully we will have more specific information and detailed information to share soon. We're just waiting for that right now. The two main topics that we know to anticipate based on our conversations with Regional Water Quality Control Board are iterative process backstops, the first. So I had gone through kind of that iterative process where we sample, we evaluate what additional BMPs are needed, growers implement those BMPs, we see if they're effective, they increase or expand BMPs, we sample again, and we continue around this iterative process. In 2016, when that conditional waiver was adopted, there were backstops built into that. And those backstops were in the form of TMDL compliance dates. So when there is a TMDL that applies in a specific watershed, once that compliance date comes due, then that iterative process stops for that particular constituent. So for the Ventura River Watershed, the two TMDLs that we have are the LG TMDL, and that compliance date was June of 2019. And then the Ventura River Estuary Trash TMDL. So the trash TMDL is kind of its separate thing because there is a minimum frequency cleanup and assessment program that can be implemented to demonstrate compliance. So as long as VCALG is supporting that program and working with other responsible parties for that TMDL to implement this minimum frequency cleanup and assessment, we are achieving compliance obligations with that TMDL. So there is an entire trash TMDL stakeholder group that VCALG and many other responsible parties fund and then help implement. The LG TMDL is one that the requirements of the current conditional waiver could be concerning because of, as well as some other TMDLs in the county. So what's required under the current conditional waiver in this backstop is that any one-time exceedance of a TMDL water quality objective after that compliance date would trigger individual edge of field monitoring for every grower in the entire watershed. And there's a lot of reasons why we have concerns with that. I'll list just a couple of them, but I could probably talk for the rest of the meeting about that. But one of the main ones is just the feasibility of implementing a program at that scale. So it would be essentially moving from a coalition managed monitoring program to an individual monitoring program, where regional board staff would need to administer the program directly with growers, develop field-specific monitoring and reporting plans, conduct all of their own sampling at multiple points around a field, have all of the samples sent to a laboratory and analyzed, and then conduct all of the reporting on their own. So the regional board staff just doesn't have the resources to implement a program like that. But then there's also just the quality of the data that would be generated that's questionable. So agriculture is a non-point source. And this would be, essentially trying to fit it into a point source regulatory framework. And one of the challenges there is that edge of field discharge is very variable. So a single snapshot in time, single sample collected isn't necessarily representative of agricultural drainage. So you could have a grower collect a sample and it could meet those benchmarks, but there could be some water quality issues coming from an operation. But then also the opposite could happen, is you could have a grower who is fully implementing these management practices that are protective of water quality and happen to have an exceedance of a really low benchmark. So what would be required in response to that isn't clear. The compliance pathway for growers isn't clear, and it would divert focus from all of the other elements of the program that I just described to a very fine scale field level sampling program. So we'd have an incredible amount of data, the quality of which would be questionable, but there would be no work on improving water quality. And that really is why we put forward this alternative proposal to the regional board, where instead of focusing on field level sampling, focusing on field level assessment and implementation, and really bringing the resources to growers to identify potential issues and then solutions to those issues. So we had requested a public workshop in front of the regional board to both, evaluate the merits of what was in the current conditional waiver, and then talk about what might be a more effective approach that would result in meaningful improvements to water quality. And this workshop happened last July, and regional board members themselves were really receptive to the message that we were bringing, both kind of in acknowledgement of our concerns with what was currently in the conditional waiver, which hasn't yet triggered, but we saw the writing on the wall and kind of could foresee the detrimental impacts that would happen to this program. And then also the opportunity that we have in the development of an ag order to really build something that's meaningful, and that will result in water quality improvement in field actions, which is really the only thing that's going to improve water quality. So more to come on that soon, hopefully. The other element that we know is going to be changing in the ag order is nitrogen tracking and reporting. And so this is kind of an expansion of these existing nitrogen management plan requirements. And they will expand into irrigation and nutrient management planning requirements that will be reported as well. And so the reason for this is in 2018, the State Water Resources Control Board adopted an EC and Joaquin WDR that included precedential requirements. So in that WDR, the state board said these requirements must be precedential for all irrigated lands in the state. So you have until this date, which is actually this year, to update your irrigated lands regulatory program order and include these requirements in them. So these requirements are going to be phasing in across the state. There's already quite a few areas that are implementing them, including the Central Valley and Central Coast. So we will be shortly behind. And as I said, it's going to move from a nitrogen management plan to an irrigation and nitrogen management plan. And then another key difference is it will be required for all operations. So it won't just be in those watersheds on that map that I had shown earlier. It's just going to be everywhere. And the summary information for those plans will have to be reported annually. And so that summary information will include applied nitrogen totals, and then the harvest yield, which will then be used to calculate nitrogen removals for, calculation of a nitrogen balance, and then nitrogen residual. And then also the irrigation and nutrient best management practices that each grower implements. The details of exactly how that reporting will happen is still in development. So that's something that, we're working with the regional board to develop a workable program and to make this as easy as possible for growers, because additional paperwork and forms is the last thing that they need. And we want to make sure that the information that is requested is necessary and meaningful and actionable as well. So the action that would result from this would be an identification of outliers for specific crop types. So you'd be looking at a crop type distribution curve and then seeing, who's an outlier in terms of their nitrogen application minus removed per acre. And then target those growers with additional education to help improve their nutrient management program. So again, more information to come in that front. And this is my last slide here, but just the anticipated schedule. And I say anticipated because this is what we had last heard from the regional board, but is subject to change. So the extended conditional waiver that is in place right now expires on September 30th of this year. So before that point, an ag order needs to be developed and then adopted by the board. So the process for the development starts with the release of a tentative order for public review and comment. And so we're anticipating that any minute now. It should definitely happen in February. We're hoping for, beginning of February, and public comment in response to that. And then there will likely be a public workshop in front of the regional board, as well as grower-specific workshops. Grower-specific workshops to walk them through, what's changing in the regulatory requirements, and then also to solicit their feedback and give them an opportunity to participate in that diplomatic process. Because regional board meetings themselves are challenging to attend if you are a grower. The most recent regional board meeting was 2 hours away from here in South LA, and this had an agricultural item on the agenda, and growers just can't, drive 2 hours away and sit for 8 hours in a meeting for their opportunity for a couple of minutes of public comment. So really pushing hard for these grower specific workshops has been a message that we have continually been repeating to regional board and their staff over the last couple of years. And so we're again going to continue to push for this. And as soon as those are scheduled, we will let everybody know. And then there's an adoption hearing at the end of all of that. So this adoption hearing will likely be in September. That's the latest that it could be in order to meet the expiration deadline of the current conditional waiver. So that could change, but that's what we know so far, and I will share any relevant updates as those come available. And that's my last slide.
Thank you, Jody. A lot of great information in there. If anyone has a question, you can type it in the Q&A, you can type it in the chat, you can raise your hand. Just give me a moment to monitor all three of those things. We did have a comment that did come in. You might be able to see it, Jody. If you open up the Q&A, it just says earlier on in your presentation on slide 7, the map, it did not show the Ventura River algae TMDL monitoring locations. That's the only comment that we had come in. And
Yeah, so totally good point, Evelina. So I mean, trying to keep our content as brief as possible for this presentation. I just focused on like our VCALG specific monitoring sites, but VCALG is also a participant of many of those TMDL stakeholder groups that are doing additional monitoring outside of our ag drainage specific sites. So VCALG is a participant of the Ventura River Algae TMDL monitoring group as well, which, you know, has extensive monitoring sites along the watershed.
And then Jody, if people want to learn more or get in contact with you, would you mind putting like your contact information in the chat?
Definitely. I'll put in the chat right now.
And what else, if people want to follow what the Farm Bureau is doing, are you guys like on social media, or you guys have like an email list, or how can people follow up on the great stuff you guys are doing?
Yeah, so you know, we are on social media to the extent the Farm Bureau is involved in social media. But we do also have newsletters as well. So we have a kind of a general Farm Bureau news and announcements, which covers more general ag issues. And then we also have a VCALG newsletter as well, which you can sign up on our website, and I'll put our website in the chat as well in a moment here.
Okay, awesome. And then we have another question in the Q&A. This will probably be our last question because I want to make sure we get to our next presenter. It says, what is the BMP implementation characteristics for Ventura River irrigated lands, types of BMPs? How effective are the BMPs, and how long have BMPs been implemented for?
Yeah, so so in terms of the types of BMPs that are recommended, you know, anybody can go on our website and find that responsibility area handout specific to each watershed. So, you know, when I type in the link to our website, you can follow through there for our water quality management plan webpage and see that. So you can see all the recommended best management practices. And then if you go to our latest WQMP or water quality management plan, which the latest one would be in 2020, it is broken down by each responsibility area. It shows you a percentage of growers who responded to each survey question. So you can, and it compares the last 3 water quality management plans right next to each other. So you're able to see, you know, what percentage of growers in the Ventura River Watershed implement nitrogen management plans. And you're able to see, you know, in 2017, how many did it? And I think 2018 was another water quality management plan year. And then in 2020, how many did it? And you're able to see kind of tracking along like that.
Thank you, Jody. Great presentation. Lynn, do you have a comment?
Just a really quick one. I don't know that anybody except the panelists can post in the chat or see the chat that the panelists post.
Oh,
So, but obviously Jody's got a great slide here with her contact information. So I don't think anybody chatting is going to be getting through to panel members.
oh, you know what? That might be Jody. If you do put it in the chat, just make sure it goes to everyone. And sometimes people type it in and it only goes like to panelists at the top, just like
yeah, it looks like you can. You see,
I think it's disabled on webinar, except among panel members.
I'll work with you on that. But I want to get to our next presenter, Jennifer. Are you ready?
Yes, we're here.
Okay, so I will let you guys take the floor. You guys, I understand you guys are going to be doing a kind of like an update on.
Yeah, so we're gonna. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go over our Foster Park Fish Passage Improvement projects that we recently completed phase 1. So I'm gonna go over sort of the background information overview. And then Sarah, our biologist, is going to go over the implementation and some of the monitoring and show some after photos and how our project weathered the storm. And
I'm trying to share screen. Let's see. Make sure you guys can see us. All right, there we go. There we go.
Okay,
We're at the beginning.
all right. Do we close this?
Just click share.
Okay,
Looks
can you
good.
see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
Oh, we have to click over on the.
all right, here we go. Okay. All right, so this is just an overview of Foster Park and of the two facilities that were causing some fish patches impairment at low flow. On the upstream, higher part of the picture, you see our subsurface dam, and at the lower part of the photo is a concrete covering on a pipe that crosses the river. Okay, and both of these facilities were exposed during storm events 2005 and 2006. The subterranean diversion dam was when it was constructed, it was underground and it has since been exposed. And then same with the pipeline. The pipeline was originally under the stream and then became exposed, and then we put a concrete cap on to protect the pipeline, but that has caused some fish passage impediments at low flows, primarily for steelhead migration. So as part of our settlement with Channel Keeper in 2019, we committed to flow-based operations where we would not pump when flows were below 4 CFS, and then we also committed to some non-flow measures, which were to address these fish passage barriers in the park. So just an overview there. Okay, and so our phase one was to notch the exposed dam, and we just completed that this fall. So that's the project we're going to really focus on. And then our second project is to address the pipeline, and we are still in feasibility studying. We have preliminary design on a fish passage facility, but we're looking back again at whether or not we can move this pipeline, we can drill it deeper, and to see which one is more cost effective, but also the longer lasting solution. All right, so some photos of the diversion dam before the project. There's a pool above and below, and you can see that it's still, several feet above the water surface elevation. So for design, we used Waterways Consulting, and they did our surveys. They did a hydrologic analysis of the flows to look at how large the notch needed to be and where it should be. And we coordinated that using the NIMS and CDFW criteria. Did a lot of coordination with resource agencies during this process. And then looking at the notch design and the dewatering plan. So the notch design, in order to facilitate passage at low flows, the notch needed to be 15 feet wide at the top, and then its total is 3 feet deep, and then the lower notch is like 2 feet wide. And so then we came up with our dewatering plan in order to access the diversion. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now to go over the permitting process and the implementation.
Sure. And on the left image here, you can see the concept for dewatering was to just partially dewater the river channel in the area that the notch would be installed, and continue to allow some flow to pass through if possible. So Rincon Consultants was our environmental consultant supporting permitting. They authored a biological resources assessment that looked at the study area around the notch, shown on the right, and did a categorical exemption for the CEQA on this project. This project required a lot of environmental permits. I'll just pop through the list, but if anyone has questions, they could always talk to us after or later. From the Army Corps, that was a Clean Water Act Section 404 nationwide permit, a biological opinion from NIMS and from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Endangered Species Act Section 7 consultation, from the Regional Board of 401 certification. We were able to get a general water quality certification for small habitat restoration projects, which is kind of part of the state's Cutting the Green Tape initiative to facilitate projects like this. So it's a little bit streamlined. For CDFW, we also were able to use Cutting the Green Tape initiative to get what's called a Fish and Game Code Section 1652 Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Act approval, which is an alternative to a traditional streambed alteration agreement, or Section 1602. And so it's more streamlined, and it should be theoretically the only permit that you need from CDFW to enact a restoration or enhancement project. So it would also include endangered species take if needed. Unfortunately, though, after we got that permit, Southern California steelhead became a candidate species under the state Endangered Species Act. So we needed additional take coverage in case there were any steelhead that would need relocated during that dewatering. So Fish and Wildlife CDFW were really great and worked quickly with us to issue a 2081A or restoration management permit just for additional steelhead take coverage if needed on the project. Then we also had county permits from Watershed Protection District and parks for encroachment permits. So this was what the construction footprint kind of looked like. The dewatering area is shown in kind of a bright green, and it's surrounded by block nets in pink. And the staging area is in orange, and then the dewatering pipeline came from the construction footprint over to a settling weir, and then was discharged downstream of the concrete capped pipeline. So here's some photos from implementation of block netting the area and conducting fish rescue to try to get as many out as we could ahead of dewatering. We mostly caught Rio chub and 3-spine stickleback. No steelhead were encountered during the project, which was kind of lucky in a sense that we got this done at the tail end of drought conditions that had persisted, and there weren't many in the watershed to have to handle. Here's how dewatering went. In the bottom, a metal coffer dam was lowered into the downstream pool, and an aqua dam, kind of bladder dam, was used on the upstream shallower pool, reinforced with lots of sandbags and kind of plastic sheeting to try to keep this area from seeping as much as possible. There was a lot of subsurface seepage up into the project, so the pumping was constant 24 hours a day to keep the area dewatered. Once exposed, the diversion dam was cut with this giant concrete saw. A lot of BMPs were in place to keep any cutting out of the water. And then a concrete form was placed. And here's the end project. The notch was built to plan, looks great. You can see the intent of the project was to allow at low flows the pool to pass through the notch and eliminate that jump height that previously existed. And here's the aerial. You can see it's quite wide, 15 feet across the top, with the stream flow passing. So the big test came on January 9th. I got out there the next day on the 10th when flows had receded considerably. And this photo is taken from the eastern bank looking west across the exposed diversion dam, and the notch is approximately right here. And the whole area was inundated still. So definitely still passable at that flow. 2 days later, the whole structure is still inundated, probably passable at that point at still a high flow. And then, 2 weeks later on the 23rd, we're getting down to low enough flows that flows focusing through the notch. And you can see it functioning nicely, remaining passable. And because we're a little quick through this, I thought I'd also show some videos from the storm event. So here's the flow on the 10th after it had receded. You can see that downstream pool still exists, but the rock groin has been somewhat annihilated. So we're curious to see how it really looks at low flows, but there was the structure just inundated. And this is all of the sediment that's washed up into Foster Park. Just filled parts of the park. And here's the next day on the 11th. And this is where the notch is, kind of on the right side, just filled over. And then from that last photo on the 23rd. All right. Kind of a quick overview, but we're really excited to accomplish that project, especially at the tail end of the drought when we didn't have to relocate any steelhead. That was very lucky, and ahead of the storm event, we got to see it fully tested.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the visuals you provided as well. Videos were awesome. If anyone has a question, you can now type into the chat. You can also use Q&A, and you can also raise your hand. But Jennifer, if you could in the chat, just like put your information, if anyone has any follow-up questions that they want to ask. I'm not seeing any hands up, just thank yous from people. Someone's asking, do you have any plans for managing the arundo in the Foster Park area?
So just before the storm, we had been, the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy had been doing a project for arundo removal. And I believe they removed some just upstream of the park. I think they're still working their way downstream. So we aren't planning any arundo removal on our own, but we're cooperating with other entities that they're planning those activities.
Cool, thank you. So our next, I did have that we would have a break, but because presentation times have kind of gone over, I think it would be in best interest to make sure that we finish, because I know everyone has busy days. So Lynn, are you ready to present, or do you need a break? Maybe Lynn needs a break.
I'm here, sorry.
Okay.
Put myself off mute. No, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So well, I'll let you take it away. You know what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Great presentations. Good to be sort of back having these overviews. The presentation about the VCALG work is it's so important, and hearing about the fish passage and how it did in the storm is really interesting. So thank you. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and focus on kind of the bigger picture, backing up to this group and the Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County, and some just general announcements and presentations, but also a little look ahead. So for some reason my slides won't advance. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's a couple things I wanted to cover today. My name is Lynn Rodriguez, Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County Program Manager and regular attendee at the Watershed Committee meetings, which includes this one. So what I wanted to do today is give a quick update on round 2, which was our last and latest and final round of IRWM grant funding through Proposition 1. Just a quick overview of, the fact that there's a lot of other programs available now for funding, thanks to federal and state opportunities. And then probably spend most of the time talking about, where we've come in this group and where we're going and what's happening at this crossroads we find ourselves at, since there's no future funding identified for IRWM. And this group will have many more opportunities over the coming year to address this issue, but I wanted to kind of tee it up for future conversation. And then just a quick update on the Water Talks program, which is our Proposition 1 program for underserved communities and engagement. So just to recap, some of you, or maybe most of you, know that we completed our project selection for round 2. Actually, the grant application has been submitted already by the Cayugas Municipal Water District, who is taking this grant. You may recall that last summer, I think it was in August, we had a project selection meeting for this watershed and ended up with one project that the City of Ventura is taking on behalf of sort of a regional regional project, and that's the Cayugas Municipal Water District and City of Ventura components of the Cayugas Ventura interconnection, which is basically a regional project that's split into 2. And that is a really important project to help enhance water resilience and water security and sustainability across the county. The other project that was approved in this watershed is the Casitas Municipal Water District's intertie with Santa Barbara. So it's a Ventura Santa Barbara intertie. So we're doing interties on both ends of the county now. There, in a previous round, the first round of Prop 1, we had a intertie with Las Virgenes and Cayugas. And that allows water to transfer back and forth between those 2 entities, which provides more sort of security and resilience during droughts or emergencies or whatnot. So those 2 projects moved forward. Just so you can see the rest of the projects that were approved across the county. UCSB is doing a shallow groundwater ecosystem function study, which is something pretty closely related to SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and the importance of maintaining groundwater ecosystem function across those areas, especially in overdrafted basins. United Water Conservation District is going to be putting in a new spreading basin. And finally, the Garden Acres Mutual Water Company was the successful disadvantaged community project that made it into our application for development of a new well on Nyland Acres. It's in Nyland Acres, if you're not familiar with that. So just take a quick second. Does anybody have any questions about the grant program? I'm not going to go into the status of all the other projects that are still active, but I will share a little bit of information about what those are, if anybody's interested. I noticed on the participant list that there's a fair number of, I think, either new people or people I haven't seen before, heard before. And I apologize for those of you that have been doing this since the very beginning, 2006, when this group formed. You're going to hear a little bit of repeat of things you've heard me say before, but I think it's important for everybody to kind of have a common understanding right now about where we are, with this program. And the fact that we did initially start for a couple of different reasons, and Paul has been on since the very beginning of this group. We started for partly just to do better coordination across the watershed and enhance things that were already happening, or build on things that were already happening. Some of Paul's work, the work of all of the entities in the watershed. And this group has brought everybody together to have focused conversations on specific programs and projects, but also the bigger picture of managing the watershed effectively. So are there any questions about round 2 before I move on? Okay. So similar to last year, there are lots of opportunities through state funding right now. Drought relief has been a big focus, and that's probably not going to change despite the fact that we've had a extremely wet winter so far. We're never that far away from drought becoming more severe again. And so I believe all of those funding programs are still going to continue with high priority into the next budget year. They are included in the next year's budget. You may have heard that the state budget is a little bit less flush with money than it was in the previous years. They're projecting a shortfall. So some funding programs have been reduced, but there's still ample funding in there for drought relief, for resilient communities, and for climate collaboratives. There's a lot of funding coming out of the Strategic Growth Council and OPR. There's also a lot of funding for fire resilience. Some of you probably applying for that. I think the RCD has been active in looking at that funding. So we still have opportunities, and I will be working more closely with Heidi in the coming months to make sure that I make available to her, and she can share with you some of the funding opportunities as they come through. Because I think that's always been an advantage of this group, is that we can share information about opportunities. If you're ever interested and you haven't already accessed this, a really good state website with grant opportunities was created a few years ago at grants.ca.gov. You can get on their listserv and be notified. Every Monday morning, they drop a whole bunch of announcements of different grants that are available. So keep your eye on that. And we'll keep providing more information as it comes available. But currently the state budget, which was released by the governor a couple of weeks ago, you can go to that website and look at the information, but I'm going to try to comb through it a little more myself. So I know there's still plenty of opportunities for funding for all of these things, for water and drought and fire resilience and climate change. So just to take a quick look at where we've come since this group formed, and WCVC also formed in 2006. So we're pretty far down the road implementing these regional integrated programs. And just some of the highlights to me, this is the Ventura River Watershed Council, picture taken outside of the Foster Library probably 10 years ago. You can see Lorraine in the picture. She was the former coordinator. But there's and everybody looks so happy. That's a good sign. It's also nice to see a huge group of people together, since Zoom sort of splits us into our different screens. But really, this program focuses a lot on programs and on outcomes and goals, but also on just the collaboration with the people. And as we move forward, trying to
Jill, or
Yes?
Lynn, can I ask you a question really quick?
Yeah, of course.
So is that where the meetings used to be held when they were in person?
That was one of the places they used to be held. Yes, and then
Okay.
we moved to Oakview, to the resource center, community resource center. I don't recall the reason for that, but maybe a little more central for folks that were coming from.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a good central location. So if you're located along the watershed and you have a good conference room, let me know. I'm going to be trying to plan those hybrid meetings in the future. It's just kind of locating a good location. But sorry to interrupt you, Lynn, but thank you.
No worries. And I think that location in Oakview was pretty good. I think we lost the library as an option because it was starting to cost money or something. So that might have been the reason that we switched over. But the resource center has good parking, and it's relatively central for people. So just to emphasize that we often talk about the projects and the money when we talk about IRWM, but it really is about what we're doing today, people getting together, sharing information, learning from each other, and collaborating on projects and programs. So for those of you that are new to this WCDC, the Watersheds Coalition of Ventura County, we have actually kind of a structure in place. We have the 3 watershed groups that meet on a semi-regular basis. Ventura River and Santa Clara River meet most frequently. Cayugas Creek a little less, but they do have a big water quality aspect in their work for TMDL compliance. And so they meet, that group meets pretty regularly. Then we have the steering committee of WCDC comprised of 2 representatives from each watershed. And your representative, if you're representatives, if you're not aware, are Jenny Trebo on this call and also Kelly Dyer from Casitas Municipal Water District. And then at the top, WCVC, that's the everybody that wants to be involved in the program, and all of our meetings are open to anybody that wants to attend. But over the years, we've gone from meeting mostly at the regional level to mostly at the watershed level. So back in the day, early on, when I first started working in this in 2005, when we were still just the 2 Western watersheds were collaborating, and we were meeting every month at the County Government Center. So things have changed a lot over the years, and a lot of people have come and gone, but we've still maintained a commitment to have these regular conversations. This is one of the documents that is the state's reporting on what is IRWM. It's the stakeholder perspectives document in their strategic plan. And it highlights what the benefits of what IRWM is, integrated regional water management, of collaboration. And these are the benefits that I believe we have been achieving throughout the years that we've been working together. And this is important to consider because going forward, if there's no grant funding, we have to decide whether we're going to keep doing this. We have to decide, you know, the watersheds can keep doing what they're doing if there's no umbrella of Watersheds Coalition, but they're funded separately. There's a funding agreement with partners that fund what I do, and then the work that Heidi's doing, funded by stakeholders in the watershed and so on. So we are at a crossroads. We need to figure out where we're going from here. And so this kind of look back at where we've been is, I hope, helpful as we think about that. Again, this is something many of you know very well. We have to do IRWM plans, or we're required to do them in order to receive funding in these implementation grants. We have now had 7 rounds of funding for IRWM projects since we started. Proposition 50, 84, and Proposition 1. And we have amended these goals over the years somewhat, but they've stayed pretty much the same. And these are the things that drive the work we do and the projects we select, and, you know, the emphasis, how we, you know, of why we are working together to try to achieve these goals. So as I said, we've had all of these rounds of funding since 2002. So we have just passed the 20th anniversary of IRWM as an approach to managing water and other resources related to water. Some of you have seen this before, but this is the kind of the summary, and this does not include round 2. I haven't modified that yet, but as of round 1, Prop 1, we had a total of 42 projects, and some of those were implementation projects and some of them were planning projects. So for example, in the Ventura River, there was the algae, sort of related to the algae TMDL, was the assessment of impacts of horse and livestock on nutrients in the watershed. And that was funded through a Prop 84 grant. And there's been others during the course of the program, but most of the projects are actually implementation projects. And $94 million have been received from the state for this. And that doesn't include all the other money that comes into the county, into the agencies for projects that are benefiting our bottom line or helping us achieve our goals. So there's certainly more than that. And for those $94 million in state funding for IRWM, 151 was matched by local funds. So significant investments have been made, and this map shows you kind of the locations, and you can see a number of projects have been implemented in the Ventura River. Our goal has, I think, always been a focus, especially in the Ventura River watershed, where there's still some pristine habitat and still independence from outside sources of water. bit about protection. This is our fact sheet that was, we developed fact sheets for all the 48 IRWM regions, and this is the one for Ventura County. It just, at a glance, it's kind of a good thing to give an elected official or a community member that maybe doesn't know what we've accomplished. These fact sheets, the first page is general to the whole state, and the second page is specific to our region. And this is posted on our website. So just a real quick overview of the kinds of projects that we've implemented throughout these years. We've had a lot of groundwater recharge, spreading grounds, and related projects. Early on, we had several septic to sewer conversion projects in the Oxnard area. Upgrades, new wastewater treatment plants or upgrades to plants, sometimes with related wetlands and other benefits. A lot of arundo removal. Permitting and removal of arundo, and the regional landscape and agricultural efficiency program. So the program that Jody was referring to earlier, that one of our projects was an ag efficiency project managed by the Farm Bureau, and of course a lot of arundo removal, as she mentioned as well. Natural floodplain management and protection on the Santa Clara River, allowing purchasing easements to from farmers to maintain the land in agriculture so that it's not developed, causing the need for more restrictive sort of gray infrastructure and allowing the river to flood. Checked in with E.J. Remsen at the Nature Conservancy after the storms, and there was definitely a lot of water and sediment that had encroached on some of the farms adjacent to the Santa Clara River, but that's preferable to moving higher flood flows further downriver when you put them in a channeled environment. Conservation measures have been implemented, or programs like replacing turf, flood protection programs, which the Natural Floodplain Management Project is one of those, groundwater management in general, and water quality improvement in general. Just a few slides of a couple of projects, these massive walls of arundo that can be so challenging to get rid of. The kind of the showpiece, Ojai Meadows Preserve. I don't know, this picture might be 15 years old or more, but I think it's a lovely picture, and it's certainly, hopefully still looks something like that. Maybe even more water at the moment. So that's been several phases of that project were funded for Ojai Valley Land Conservancy over the many cycles of funding. This is the very first project, one of our very first projects in Prop 50, the spreading grounds up in San Antonio Creek, which actually spanned two different grants. We were able to move money from Prop 50 into Prop 84. Two different entities were managing it. And I'm just going to, at this point, say that's a testament to Sue Hughes, who used to be the grant administrator and the chair of WCVC, who retired as of last Friday. So if you knew Sue, she has left the building, but she left behind a legacy of really valuable work and collaboration with the state agencies and also with all the project proponents. A couple other examples in El Rio, a special project that was developed to reduce localized flooding near a school. And that water actually then, you see Jeff Pratt, the Public Works Director, pouring water onto the stormcrete that allows the water to percolate in and ultimately make its way to the groundwater basin. And then on the right is just a ag irrigation project. On the right, you see the Wainini outfall for the salinity management pipeline. This is a very large project that has been impacting the Cayugas Creek watershed area, in the sense that it's a series of, the pipeline takes water that has been treated in desalters. There's a network of desalters that have been built or planned to remove salts from the watershed and out to sea. And this was funded in Prop 84. There's been, I think, 5 phases of the pipeline project that have been funded, and desalters that have been funded with IRWM funding. Significant improvements to water quality in the Cayugas Creek and on the Oxnard Plains. And then a treatment facility at the City of Camarillo. An early project Bert was on earlier. I don't know if he still is. Bert Rapp, who's now with Ventura River Water District, but previously with the City of Fillmore. And his project was, a new treatment plant and adjacent wetlands that has produced water that's able to be used within the community for irrigation, treated effluent for irrigation purposes. Also part of this planning effort has, in the last go around, was to do some a closer look at the impacts of climate change on our county, on our region. And we were fortunate to get funding from the Resources Legacy Fund to do this analysis that was conducted by 2 climatologists at Desert Research Institute at the University of Nevada, Reno. It was really a great process. Ojai Valley Land Conservancy was kind enough to take that money on behalf of the work, because NGO to NGO works better than NGO to government agency, and RLF is a private foundation. So we had a lot of great meetings and conversations, and a lot of good work was done with that funding, and helped us as we worked, selected projects in round 1. We were able to use some of the information that had come from that to focus our efforts a little bit more specifically on what we wanted to do. This is work that should continue. We continue to look at these vulnerabilities. These were the vulnerabilities which are pretty obvious, but were identified by stakeholders in a series of meetings that we had, including a focused meeting in the Ventura River of the Ventura River Watershed Council. A lot of concerns about ongoing and increasing drought, wildfires. Obviously, we had since that time, we've had continued wildfire threats, impacts to agriculture from reduced water availability. Fortunately, I think you probably heard, we just went from a 5% of state water allotment to a 30% of state water allotment being delivered by DWR, thanks to the wet winter that we're having, which helps the Oxnard Plain and folks in the other 2 watersheds right now. So these are the things that are driving, should be driving a lot of our discussions in the future. Just a couple of shots of some of the damages and threats that come from climate change, pretty obvious. If you can't tell, that runway is the Santa Paula Airport. I believe that was 2005. And then the most recent, well, not the most recent, but the Thomas Fire in Lake Casitas. And focusing on water resilience strategies, which kind of coupled with the projects that we're selecting. So now we have to think about, where do we go from here? How do we want to continue what we've been doing, kind of on the path we're on? The first thing is that we're looking at, what is the state going to do? And if the legislature is not going to approve funding, what should we do locally? But here are some of the things that the state is doing that we're connecting with. They have a 20th anniversary video that's been prepared. I'll be sharing that with everybody as soon as it's complete. Just, honoring all the work that's been done across the state, and hopefully educating our lawmakers about what has been accomplished in those 20 years and the need to try to capture that and continue it in some form with funding support from the state. A lot of IRWM regions in California can't afford to continue their planning programs or programs like what we're doing here without help. We have the resources in this county probably to continue on some level, but underserved, counties like Inyo Mono and parts of the Central Valley and San Joaquin, they just don't have the funding to continue doing this work. So there's a lot of advocacy for that. The IRWM Roundtable of Regions has been working on that. If you don't know, there are 48 IRWM regions in California, and all of them were formed around getting funding through starting with Prop 50. So it's like, what do we do now? The state's focus at the moment is very much on climate and watershed resilience. Those are the two of the 3 pillars of the California Water Plan update, the third one being equity and safe drinking water for all. So watershed resilience is something that we're looking at as possibly we build on IRWM to accomplish that, as well as climate resilience from all the work we've been doing. The governor's water resilience portfolio and this last summer's document that he released about enhancing water supply during the drought. And then there's just a lot of money out there for resilience. That's the current state buzzword, if you will, that we're all working on. And it's not something new for us. That's kind of the approach we've always had, I think. But so then next steps for our discussion about what happens, I'll just first of all say that the program I work under is funded by about 18 funding partners. Some of you are on the line here. And the MOU that was formed to drive that, which was first adopted in 2008, expires in August of this year. And Sue Hughes has now retired. And so we just have to take a look at what does the structure look like? Where do we, what path do we want to be on, and what things do we want to focus on? And so we're going to convene with our funding partners for WCVC. It may be that the Watershed Council and the other one that's funded by partners, or actually they all are, want to have similar conversations. We need to replace Sue as the chair. And we probably need to engage more leaders in the county around, what does our future coordinated and collaborative water resilience planning look like across the county? The Board of Supervisors has 2 new members, well, actually 3. DNA Lopez took over Carmen Ramirez's seat when she passed away in October. And the other 2 members just took their seats in January. And there's going to be an ongoing series of Water 101 training for the whole board. And there'll be some discussions about the role of the county government in water management. That's going to be an interesting conversation, and see where that goes. And then we're coordinating through the roundtable of regions. We're coordinating with all the other IRWM regions in the state. So we have a pretty strong voice as a group, and just that gives us leverage with the legislature if they understand. They brought this to us in the form of Proposition 50 back in 2002, and has it achieved what it was meant to achieve? And what should it be going forward? And one thing that I think we're really going to see is more work in our underserved communities. There's a lot of funding for that. There's a lot of need for that. We've, I think, really done a good job of working with our underserved communities, thanks to the funding in Prop 1, disadvantaged community involvement. The program is called Water Talks. I've shared that with this group before. I think that there's an interest in at least maintaining that kind of engagement as a coordinated effort. Because without any ongoing IRWM funding, it may be difficult to continue. That was a nice social infrastructure, if you will, to keep that program going and engage more and more people in the communities. This is just for the roundtable. So in strategic advocacy down there, kind of at the bottom, that's really what the group has been about. And we've developed some very good relationships, not only with our members in the different regions across the state, but also with other organizations like AQUA, and I shouldn't use all the acronyms, Association of California Water Agencies, the Floodplain Management Association, the California Association for Stormwater Quality, and others. So we're working the CARCD for the Resource Conservation Districts. Okay, so did I do next? I guess I did next step. So the steering committee, I'm going to go back to my last slide. The next step, I forgot to mention the survey. We are conducting a survey, and that was sent out to the whole WCVC. I don't know if Heidi was able to or has sent that out to all of you, because some of you are not on my list. But at this point, this month, we really want to focus on getting all of your input. So I created a survey. We've had, I think, about 20 people so far have responded. I'm going to keep it open until the end of February. So I encourage you to please complete that survey.
Yeah, Lynn, before the newsletter went out, the survey wasn't finalized yet.
Yeah.
But if you send it to me now, I can put it with the email I send out afterwards, like with the recording of the meeting and everything. I can include it then. Okay, thank you. And then we'll also, the steering committee is going to conduct a few meetings, which will be open to anybody in the anybody that wants to attend, to just talk through some of the benefits of what we've been doing, and
the needs that individual entities have for this ongoing collaboration and what it should look like moving forward. So just a couple of really quick things about the Water Talks program. You've seen this before, probably. We have a website. This is something we're doing in collaboration with the Greater LA IRWM region and the Upper Santa Clara. So the 3 IRWM regions are together in this program, and we have area-wide outreach materials. We've had focused workshop sessions within the county right before COVID, and then we had to go virtual, but we're back doing in-person. We had a really successful event in Santa Paula in October, and we have another one coming up on the Ventura Avenue on February 8th. And that's Cause. The organization Cause does a lot of work in that community, and they have a great outreach method in that community by, you know, literally calling people, and they conduct surveys over the phone or over text. And they just completed a survey of community members on the Ventura Avenue regarding climate change and concerns about impacts to the community. And this event on February 8th will focus on, you know, literally with maps spread out on the table, everybody kind of identifying where they would like to see things happen. And then we'll summarize that, and, you know, there will be we'll be looking for funding to implement some of those ideas coming straight from the community. So I think it's at the Bell Arts Center on the Avenue, and I think it's going to be really good. City of Ventura is going to be represented there. County board members. The one in Santa Paula, we had a lot of elected officials, which was really great for community members to have their ear about these specific concerns that they have. So we're also working on developing or completing the tribal engagement component, which is a little slow to get started, but there will be some what they call allyship training, which will be virtual. Heidi has participated and I have participated in the other ones that were held across the funding area. And that'll be an opportunity to understand how to better work with tribal members, you know, tribal elders or community members who want to see, or, you know, just want to be engaged in how projects are developed, and for the development of those projects to benefit from their cultural knowledge and practices. So that will be, stay tuned for the announcement of when those are going to be. That grant just got extended to the end of December of this year. So we have a little extra time. We did get some funding through the state's drought relief program for 2 projects in the Island Acres area. So that our Water Talks committee, which is meeting again in February, on February 22nd, has been the incubator and the idea for generator for a lot of good projects. And this will be the first time 2 mutual water companies have been given money directly from a program like this, which is a little challenging because these grants are not that easy, but we're excited to see those move forward. El Rio and Island Acres are very impacted with challenges to their infrastructure and their management capacity. So it's great for them to get that money. So this is the survey link, and you can get that. I'll send something to you, Heidi, that you can forward to everybody. And probably sometime in the next couple of months, another conversation with this watershed, maybe focused in on a discussion instead of just me talking, where we can review the survey results and consider, you know, where does the council want to go? There's an ongoing funding stream there, maybe nothing changes. And then how do you see the region-wide effort benefiting this watershed? So that's all I have.
Thank you, Lynn. If anyone has any questions, you can type it in the chat. You can use Q&A. You can raise your hands. I will also be at that Water Talks event. Lynn, are you going to be there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll be there. So you can come say hi to me in person. I don't see any hands up. I will include the survey link in like the after meeting email that I will hopefully send out today or tomorrow once I get the webinar posted online. Yeah, I don't see nothing coming in the chat. A couple closing remarks for me. Like I mentioned, I am gonna be on the lookout for a conference room. I saw someone in the comments that they liked the Oak Park location. So I've heard that from a couple people, so I'll probably be looking to book that for our next meeting, provided I get all the equipment lined up in time. But if anyone else wants to suggest a meeting location, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to type my email into the chat. And I see someone is asking a question, what time on February 8th is that Water Talks event, Lynn?
That's going to be at 6 p.m. And I can get it. We're not broadly advertising it to everybody in the community. Well, I'm not sure. That's Cause is the one that has kind of helped us figure out who to invite. We welcome participation, but I'm not sure they have the capacity if, hundreds of people wanted to come. But I'll get the information to Heidi so that she can, in the follow-up, you can publish the address for that. And it'll be an hour and a half. The other reason is that as part of these events, they serve a meal, well, burritos to the participants that come. Many of them are families and they bring their children with them, and it's hard for them to come to an event like this unless there's a way for them to, for some food and their kids can be with them. So that's the how the meetings are run. It's like you have the discussion and breakout groups, English and Spanish, and then followed by a little dinner. So.
And then we got one question for the panelists. So not everyone could see the question, but it came in with what's the estimated costs associated with Ventura County Watershed Council continuing. And Renee, I don't know if you're aware, this watershed kind of has a separate funding stream than the Watersheds Coalition. In our charter, we have like a leadership team, and they put in money for that. So it is kind of a separate issue than what Lynn is talking about, but it could be related in terms of exploring ways to keep coordinating across watersheds, because Lynn's been a great conduit for that. So if you have more questions, you're welcome to email me about that. And with that, that's about the end of our meeting. Paul, were you able to figure out screen sharing, or do you want me to just include those images in the after meeting email I'll send out?
So when I tried to share PowerPoint, it had like a little triangle exclamation point on it. So I don't think, for some reason, I don't know if it's my computer settings or my Zoom settings or what.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I apologize for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post them on my online blog on venturariver.org. So I'll make those available.
Okay.
at some
And if
point.
you're fine with it, I can link to that in the after meeting email as well.
Yeah, that's fine. They're not up there yet, but I will do that soon. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. Our next meeting, hopefully the goal is it can be a hybrid meeting, and I will let you guys know. Also, this meeting link might be changing. I know some people might use the same meeting link for all the meetings. If I'm going to switch it to not a webinar format to a meeting format, which I am interested in doing, the link might change. So if you have anything saved on your calendar reoccurring, I'll send an email if that is the case. So just heads up about that. But yeah, thank you guys all for joining today, and look forward to seeing you guys all next time. So bye.
Thank you.